now with some crazy music, huh? I can't seem to find a good playlist. So, Double T, what is on your little banner? Oh my goodness. Well, aren't you a rascal? I've had this little pennant forever. I can't remember if I've shown it on here before. I just thought it was so cute. And it's just right for Double T to so how are you guys? Happy Monday. Oh, the weekend always goes by so fast. Yeah, I was having trouble finding good music today. So, unfortunately, these free playlists I use are sometimes leave something to be desired. You know, it's either the music is too slow or the music is too fast. I can't find a happy medium. Anyway. So, hello, everybody. Robin is back. Yay! I'm so glad that you're back, Robin. Or that you're here today. I don't know if your very full life is still very full, but I'm so glad you're here today. And Robin sent me a picture of a sunbonnet suit quilt that I think had been, I don't know if you had assumed it was lost or you just didn't know where it was, and your sister unearthed it, and I love it so much. It's such a cool and very good sunbonnet suit. So, and Druid, you are very welcome for the sub. I cannot pay my mods, but I can always pay for my my longest serving mods access to my channel. So it's the least I could do. And who else is here? Martin, hi! And Mod Art, hi. So good to see you guys. Okay, so your mom was just here for a visit. Okay. I wasn't sure if she was like in transit between, I don't know, like her home facilities, that kind of thing. That's cool that you unearthed it, though. It's always cool to find something a beloved item. So I'm glad that it is no longer lost. So did you guys have a good weekend? Like I said, mine went by way too fast. It was a little raunchy this weekend. We had a little bit of rain. Meh. Today is the most beautiful day. It's a little humid, but I went outside. I had to move my car earlier today, and I was like, oh, this blue sky, it's so beautiful. Excuse me. I think the next 2 days we're supposed to be getting like insanely low humidity, like the kind of humidity that is unheard of in August, because it's like you can walk outside without immediately like sweating. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think this remains to be seen a little bit, changing some things around tonight maybe. But I think tomorrow I am going to go to the Smithsonian to and now I'm like drawing a complete blank on the name. I think it's Pattern and Paradox, the Amish quilt exhibit, because it comes down really soon. It's been up, I think, since April, and just a crazy summer, spring and summer, that I haven't had a chance to go, and I want to. So that, fingers crossed, is on my list to do, and that show will be coming down, and so then I hope it's okay that I will show you pictures of it. Typically the Smithsonian, they don't come after people. But I'm always a little leery about some of the bigger institutions where it's difficult to ask for permission, because the thing is, you ask for permission and they'll tell you no. Better to ask forgiveness, right? So, but yeah, hopefully I can share. And I can't remember how many quilts are in that show. I want to say it's like 30. But I could just be grabbing that out of nowhere. But anyway, I'm looking forward to it. I've seen Yannick and Smucker talk about it a couple times now. I saw the kind of opening for it. She did a lecture there at the Smithsonian, and I don't know if any of you had a chance to watch it, but it was the kind of thing where you just had to register to watch the live stream of it. And I think that's all you had to do to go to it. If you went to it in person, it was a free event. But anyway, the pictures she showed were incredible, and I can't wait just to see, you know, in person what all these quilts look like. So that will be fun. And many things are coming up. Actually, what I should do before I get into it today is show you guys. Jill has made these lovely little calendars, which I've been a bad person and not showing to you. So I'm going to share these. So this is the August calendar. So we will, we're halfway through it, but it is helpful to show you guys. I am doing my normal stuff this month, no changes, but tomorrow is the Anne Hermes interview. And we just finished reading Anne's book, which is about Pennsylvania pillowcases. And we will have her on to interview her, just like we did with Dawn Ronigan. And if you're not familiar with this, I know everybody kind of in the chat knows about it, but if you're watching this later and you're not familiar, my friend Jill and I do a stream on YouTube called Quilt Nerding, and we do it on Tuesday nights and every other Wednesday night. And so on the 27th, we're going to kind of just do a break night where we're not really going to talk about any books. We've got some other things planned. So the 27th will sort of be just a fun day. The 20th is that interview, and you're not going to want to miss that, even if you didn't read the book. Anne is fantastic. She's a lot of fun. She may have some surprises in store for us. She and Jill have been talking about some things. So don't miss those. Put them on your calendar. And then, of course, the rest of the month is normal for me as far as this stream. And then we have September. And this is important because we are going to seminar. And I think a few of you lurkers might be going to seminar too. So we're not going to have oh, hey, Jill. We're not going to have regularly scheduled streams that week. We have recorded something just for everybody, you know, because we know how much you miss us. So we did record some stuff the other day that we're going to put out there for you. So, you know, you'll have a little bit of us. But those will be, like I said, pre-recorded. They're not going to be live. And then we will come back on the 10th. Will be for our first day back, and that'll be our regular book talk Tuesday. And then that second week in September, I'm going to skip my Thursday stream, and we're going to do a dual stream on Friday. So we can talk about all of the wonderfulness of seminar and give you guys the lowdown on everything we saw and did. One other thing, if you have been watching Needlework Nights, we have decided to scale that down to just once a month. We have a little bit of lower viewership, and we know that, you know, it's summertime. But considering viewership and the fact that Needlework Nights weeks, I stream for 4 days in a row, we decided to go ahead and try it out once a month and see how that goes. Just gives me a little bit of a break and, you know, keeps us from being overly saturated in your life. So I'm going to post these on the KTV Facebook page. It's, you know, I'm not sure if you guys pay attention to that, but I would suggest following it because I'll post these things here, and especially since Jill makes these things for us now. I'm very bad with the admin stuff, you guys. So a great appreciation for Jill for making this, and I'll post it so that you will know. So I think that's probably my big announcement. We are getting ready to start. Oh, where is it? Here it is. We are getting ready to start after seminar. We will be reading Soft Covers for Hard Times, which is our friend Mary Kay Waldvogel's book, one of her wonderful books. So if you're interested in getting in on that, it's pretty easy to find the book on Abe Books, Amazon. It is out of print. Well, actually, it may not be out of print, but I do know that you can get used copies of it. So pretty affordably. And Mary Kay will be doing an interview with us. That'll be later on, and in October, I think. And we have kind of an interesting giveaway that I'm talking to her about. So you definitely want to tune into that. That is definitely a book. Not to say the others have not been, But that is definitely a book you may already have, and we would really love for you to come and get a chance to see and hear what Mary Kay has to say. So we are very lucky. We have such wonderful friends who support us and are willing to, you know, come out and have fun with us. So, all right. It's funny, I've been listening to this book about podcasting, and, you know, podcasting is a little bit different than live streaming. I mean, live streaming is not scripted, you know, I mean, I have an outline. It's, oh yes, thanks Jill for reminding me. We do have affiliate links. Oh, thank you. She'll put those in the chat. But yeah, if you're not a member of the Quilt Nerding group on Facebook, why not? You don't have to be doing our book club thing. You know, there's lots of folks that don't, you know, they either lurk or they watch later, or they don't, you know, just make it to the streams, but they do post things there. And sometimes it's really interesting, fun things that I never would have come across. So join that. You don't have to be part of the book club, but it's out there for you to enjoy. And sometimes we post stuff that's you wouldn't know any other way. So what was I gonna say? Oh my goodness, am I still sharing my screen? Sorry guys, I created Inception there. So yeah, I lost my train of thought there for a minute. Today, I thought I would do, you know, it's Monday, so I thought I would do something fun. Not that everything I do isn't fun, but I thought I would be a little bit snarky and silly today. It has been a while, and in fact, honestly, I think it has been exactly a year, just about, since I did an Am I the A-hole? And I'll explain what that is if you're new to this concept. But this is my 1-year Twitchiversary. The last couple weeks, I'm not exactly sure which day it was. They sent me a thing that said, hey, your Twitchiversary is coming up, but they never really said exactly what day it is. I think it is probably past because Drew and I are getting the 13-month badges, and I think probably a few other folks have 13-month badges. So yeah, happy Twitchiversary. I've been doing this for a year, which, I mean, that feels like a pretty big accomplishment. I mean, I've had to cancel a few scheduled streams. You know, I mean, there have been trips and things, and I really only think there's been a couple where I had to just be like, guys, I can't, and that was when I was sick. So yeah, I feel really good about that. I've been here just about every Monday and Thursday for a year. But with that in mind, it reminded me that we have not done an Am I the A-hole? And it was kind of fun. And honestly, I love drama that doesn't involve me. And so, does Twitch tell me how many streams I've done? Yes. But I don't know if it does an aggregate. You have to go in there there's monthly reports. So, yeah, thanks guys. Yeah, it feels like a big milestone. Yeah, feels good. Of course, I'm also reminded, like, okay, I've been here for a year. There are a few things that I have never bothered to do, such as putting up the video that you're supposed to do, a video that's like when you're not around, you know, tell people. They've been telling me to do that for like 11 of 12 months. So I still need to do that. I have a very long to-do list post-seminar, and I'm going to get to it by the end of the year, darn it. I'm going to get some stuff knocked off there. So anyway, yes. Happy Twitchiversary. And so, therefore, I wanted to bring back something silly, which is the, yes, the nagging. Thanks, Joe. A thing that I did in the very early days, which is Am I the A-hole? And what this is, if you have never run across, and it's abbreviated AITA. There is also a version of it, Am I Being Unreasonable? And that's AIBU. That's usually on the mommy blogs, the places where they're not going to use the word asshole. But you know, I feel like we can use a mild profanity here. So, Am I the asshole? Is, you know, it's a good thing. 90% of the time I read these, and it is very clear to me who is in the right and who is in the wrong. And I tend to always agree with what the consensus is. Now, to back up a little bit, AITA has its origins in Reddit, which is a platform that is old school forum stuff. So, the kind of forums that, you may have looked at in the very beginning of the internet days. But there are, if you can think of a topic, there is a what's called a subreddit, a forum for it on Reddit. It's a terrible place to go if you are in a hurry, because you will fall down a rabbit hole, and you will have a hard time climbing back out, because Reddit is full of horrible things, and Reddit is full of some cool things. Well, one of the things is the "Am I the asshole?" And there are flavors of it. There's the kind of mild ones. And then there's ones called "Am I the devil?" Things like that. But they all kind of aggregate under AITA. So I found some more quilty, crafty ones, and they are from this past year. So they are not repeats, as far as I can tell. I'm pretty sure there's one where I'm kind of like, did we read this one before? But it says it's only within the past few months. So we're going to look at those. Threads is a good description of what is under the subreddits. So in Reddit, you have like the big platform, and then if you're subreddits, and so example, you'd have a subreddit might be /crafty snark, which is, don't go there unless you have a lot of time to kill, because it's just full of it. But then there would be the individual threads then on that subreddit. So that's kind of how they work. It's fun to go there and sort of just do a drive-by. It's kind of like, I like to visit. I don't want to live there. But I do have some really cool stuff on there. There's one subreddit that I follow. That's "What is this thing?" And sometimes it's sewing related stuff, and I'll see, somebody will post something. I'm like, I know what that is. And 90% of the time, a million people have already responded. But it's kind of fun when you know what some oddball thing is. Anyway. Yeah. Oh, Marada, Mr. Rogers, I'm proud of you. Oh, I love that. Okay, are you guys ready? Are you ready for one of these? Let me open my screen so I can read these to you. I'm gonna leave these on this screen because I'm not wearing my bifocals today. Okay, so this first one is kind of long, but I'm going to read the whole thing because I think there's important info in here. So here we go. Am I the asshole for wanting my cousin to make a quilt for my baby? I, a 28-year-old female, am currently 7 months pregnant with my first child. My whole family was excited for me when I announced it, and my grandma had promised to make a quilt for my baby. She was an avid crafter. She loved knitting, crochet, embroidery, and all kinds of sewing, including quilting. Very sadly, my grandma suffered a major heart attack and passed away almost 3 months ago. Only a few weeks ago, I found out that all her crafting supplies had been given to my younger cousin, who's a 21-year-old female. This wasn't a surprise since my cousin, I'll call her Bree, is as much of a crafting fanatic as our grandma. She learned a lot from her, and they used to spend family gatherings together, sitting and working on their respective projects. My husband suggested, the husband always gets in trouble. My husband suggested that maybe Bree would be willing to finish the quilt our grandma had started to make. I called her and asked if she had the quilt in progress. She said she wasn't sure where it might be. Basically, my uncles packed up everything, and that she didn't have time to look for it just then. I then asked her if she would be willing to finish it once she did find it, since I really wanted my baby to have something my grandma had at least partially made. She said she was sorry, but no, because she realistically wasn't going to get around to it anytime soon. And there's other reasons. She gives the reasons why she can't. And the last thing she said really stuck in my craw, which was along the lines of, and I don't really feel like making a quilt, so it wouldn't be enjoyable. I let it go, but then I talked about it with my mom later about how infuriating her answer was. I understand she has time constraints, but she still works on her hobbies, so basically boils down to her not caring enough about me or my baby to do this for us. If our grandma could do it, why couldn't she, My mom agreed that she was rude and told her brother, which is Bree's dad, about what she said, and then the whole family knew and had opinions. Bree called a couple of days later, saying that my behavior was childish and that it's in bad taste to complain about not receiving a gift. She said she found the fabric that Grandma had intended to use, and it turns out she hadn't even gotten started on it before she passed. I don't know how to feel about this. I'm really sad that even if the quilt gets made somehow, that none of it will be my grandma's work. So, what do you guys think about this one? You know, my initial reaction, of course, is, how dare you ask your cousin to make this quilt? And I mean, that's kind of still the way I feel about it. You know, it's a wonderful and beautiful thing that the grandma was going to make this quilt. It is very sad, in my opinion, of course. I think anybody would agree. Very sad that she never got started on the quilt and then she passed away unexpectedly. Okay, so Madar says she should have asked the cousin for the fabric and finish it herself. As someone who keeps inheriting craft rooms, yes. You are the asshole. I love it. To ask for the unfinished quilt is one thing, but to ask her to make it is something else. Yep. So here are some of the responses that I think you guys will feel vindicated. So you're the asshole. I'm sorry, but you did start drama unnecessarily. Asking if she was able to finish the quilt was fine, but her answer was no. You then shit-talked her to others and caused unnecessary conflict. Totally agree. And the whole attitude of accusing her of not caring about you or your baby comes off as very entitled. I would agree with that too. Another person says, quilting is very time consuming and it sounds like this is not something your cousin enjoys doing. You should have asked her to look for the unfinished quilt so you could find someone else to complete it. I agree. It's funny of the original poster to accuse her cousin of not caring about her baby while so blatantly not caring about her cousin's time and the effort she would need to put into this project. So, yeah. So it sounds like we're all on the same page here. And yes, the collective on Reddit, and this is also the beautiful thing about Reddit with these Am I the Asshole? It will, once people have responded, it will summarize. And for the most part, people claim to this person's the asshole. And I wholeheartedly agree. Now here's another take on this very similar kind of baby quilt situation. Okay. So this one says, am I the asshole for making a quilt out of gifted baby clothes? Hi. So I, 26-year-old female, have 2 kids, a 4-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old son. When I was pregnant, I was gifted a lot of clothes, baby blankets, sheets, all sorts of items from women in my family and friends group. The bulk of it was for newborn babies and bassinets. I also have a lot of clothes that my daughter has grown out of as well. In short, I have a lot of baby items in excess. I recently took up sewing as a hobby. It started with altering my own clothes. Then I found a pattern for an infinity scarf. Ended up with fabric from an old bassinet sheets. I thought it'd be really pretty, so I decided to make a quilt from my son's baby clothes that I was going to gift him for his first birthday. Well, my mother-in-law, 54-year-old female, came to my room. Keep in mind, we live together. I have my own small cabin that serves as a bedroom. She came into her room the other day and saw me cutting up my son's old clothes. She then asked, "What are you doing? Why are you cutting up all his baby clothes?" I told her, I had these, so I wanted to make a quilt for his first birthday. She just stared at the squares of fabric I cut and said, "These are good clothes. Why are you ruining them? And these are gifts you're ruining." And she said, "I don't think I'm ruining them. I'm putting them to use since he can't fit into them anymore. These could be donated to other babies that need them. There's nothing wrong with them. Why don't you keep them for when you have another baby?" At this point, I could see her getting angry. I don't plan on having another baby, and I thought that making a quilt for him would be a good idea. The mother-in-law finalizes her rant with, "You should just save them or donate them if you don't want them." So then she goes into the dining room for dinner later that night, and I could hear my father-in-law. Oh, I'm sorry. I could hear the mother-in-law talking to the father-in-law about it. Her room is connected to the living room, which is connected to the dining room. I heard her say that I was cutting up good baby clothes that she and the family gave me, and said I was ungrateful because I was ruining gifts. He was talking about how he agreed and that I should have just given the clothes back if I didn't want them. It goes on and on and on a little bit. So, okay, Mara Dim has said, I come from a family where a third and fourth generation are wearing hand-me-down baby clothes, so it's a big deal. Jill says she's cutting up her own baby's clothes, and this lady's making a stink about it. Well, I mean, this mother-in-law possibly gave some of these clothes to the baby. So, of course, I have thoughts about that too. Let's see, what does she say? I honestly thought because he had grown out of the clothes and because I had no need for them, this wouldn't be a big deal if I repurposed them. At least they stay in the family. Ah, hey Jan. So, I mean, how do you guys feel about this? I mean, is this something like, does the mother-in-law have, you know, does she have legs to stand on? Yeah. Yes. Jill says they become hers once they are given, unless they're handmade clothes. Well, I mean, why does it matter if they're handmade? Okay, our family thinks some of them is family owned and not just mommy of the moment. Okay, if that's culturally what happens in your family. I mean, maybe this young mother maybe just didn't understand like the culture of the family. I think about, so I don't know that my family necessarily has this expectation. Yeah. So it's possible that her husband's family is that way. Yeah. Handmade would have more meaning to people if they're fast fashion. Who cares? Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Are they onesies from Target? Or is this like the family's christening gown? I think, and it seems like, and I mean, no shade to any family culture here, but like Mara Dim, it sounds like what you're saying is perfectly good, sturdy clothes go down the line to other children. Regardless, it doesn't have to be an heirloom item like a christening gown. Whereas, if it's fast fashion, well, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I'll be honest. I bought a lot of my son's clothes at Target because I worked there when he was little. Some of their little kids and baby clothes are actually, even though they're technically fast fashion, they're still better than the ladies and, the ladies' fast fashion. So, okay. So Druid says, I understand having a need within the family. I came from that also, but it's her baby's clothes. Oops. Wait a minute. Let me go back here. So it's her baby clothes, and a true gift is out of one's hands once it's given and deserves not even a thank you, really. The mother-in-law should shut her face. I would trek halfway across the world in snowshoes to avoid having a mother-in-law. Yeah, okay. So Jill says, if the concept of family-owned clothes weren't made clear to her family ahead of time, then I don't think this lady has a leg to stand on. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I get it. I get the culture, like a family culture of that. And it's just unfortunate. And I guess, I mean, yeah, bad communication, exactly. I guess I'm kind of wondering, like, did these things not come up with the daughter? Because she said the daughter's 4 years old. Why is it just coming up now that it's the son? That's interesting. I guess I was kind of on the fence with this one because I kind of understand this one too, in terms of, I don't want to say my family is necessarily like this, as far as having this opinion about, like this, I don't want to say it's a policy, but just having this kind of thing about clothing. Interestingly enough, this one was a not the asshole. But for the most part, people pretty much said what, you know, you guys are saying outside of the family culture of, you know, we pass our clothes down unless they're totally trashed. You know, one person says the gift already served their intended purpose. They belong to you and you're making good use out of them. You know, and I kind of thought of that too, like keeping it in the family. Yeah, most people are saying it's a wonderful and creative idea. Lots of good memories. Active word here is gifts, not family heirlooms. They are yours when you're using them in a cool way. Yeah. I guess, you know, I mean, I think this probably comes also from, you know, the family culture of handing down clothing, but also I think a little bit of it is probably people who don't understand things like memory quilts. People who don't understand quilts, period. You know, I mean, you get people that are just like, why would you make a quilt? Like, why? Why you just go buy a blanket at Walmart? Or why would you make why would you have a quilt where you cut up fabric and put it back together when a blanket or an Afghan or, you know, a coverlet or whatever's fine? I think there's just a lot of people out there that do not get where we're coming from, you know, as quilters. So I really kind of was on the fence about this one. Yeah, people who think their gifts are conditional. And, you know, that's the kind of thing, like, if I ever give somebody, and I rarely give people handmade gifts because, for the most part, they don't deserve them. Yeah, okay, so people who do not want others to create. Well, exactly, because they kind of look at creating things as like, why would you bother making things when you can just go to the store and buy it? There's lots of people that have that attitude. But, you know, when I have given things that took a lot of effort, I kind of have always given the disclaimer, like, look, I made this thing. I hope you like it. If you don't, I understand. But I would ask, if you ever, you know, don't want it anymore, or you've outgrown it or whatever, give it back to me because I know somebody else who might like it, or I would like to have it back for myself. You know, I've always kind of conditioned gifts like that, like, you know. Yeah, thinking of it as playing, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, Jill. Jill does have a handmade gift for me, so yes, you are a person who deserves a handmade gift. There's other people pretty close to me in my family who I'm like, you get no more handmade things from me because you don't appreciate it. Okay. Here's one. This one is... I totally agree, Marodem. Handcrafts are more than play. I think if you've spent 10 minutes with me, you know how I feel about making, because I think it's good for our mental health. It's good for community. It's good for just, you know, having a goal and meeting it. And it's a love language for some people. There's so much more, you know, in needlework and handcrafts than people give them credit for. You know, it's not just a hobby. It's not just a waste of time. There's so much more there. So you guys are my people. We understand each other. All right. So this next one, I haven't read it in detail, but the subject line, I've already got my dander up. So am I the asshole for being upset about my husband and mother-in-law organizing, figure quotes, my craft room? So, mother-in-law organized my craft room while we were on vacation. Then my husband lied to me to my face about it. So, here's the story. Oh, let's see, what did Marodem say? I learned that a friend had a stroke and nobody was giving her guidance to regain. Oh my goodness. She's a hairdresser. I said she needs macrame. She's already started. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Oh, you know, somebody who's had a stroke should be getting like occupational therapy. Oh my goodness. But I'm so glad that you were able to give her a suggestion. You're absolutely right. Macrame does seem like a good thing for the kind of dexterity that a hairdresser would use. Oh wow. I hope she's on the road to recovery. That's something that always scares me. You know, anything that would render me unable to do my craft. Like, you know, chop off my legs if you have to. I don't have to walk, but I need my hands. I need my eyes. Okay, so Here's the story. We moved into a new house a few months ago. I've still had many boxes in my craft room to unpack. My husband has asked me before if I wanted help with the room, and I've always said no, because I don't want anyone else messing with my stuff. I didn't have the moving company touch it, and I intentionally packed it so that I could reorganize it whenever I unpacked it. It would be more difficult for someone who doesn't know, excuse me, doesn't know what they're looking for to go through and to try to do something with my stuff. So my husband decided it would be helpful to go behind my back and have his mom do it. I noticed it as soon as I got home. I asked him if he had his mom do it. He completely lied to my face and told me he hired an organizing company to come in. It's the most disorganized mess I've ever seen. I got suspicious a few days ago, whenever it was so poorly organized, that there were greeting cards in 3 different areas of the room. I decided to go through my husband's phone because he kept saying it was this company he found on Facebook. I was curious about what company he hired and also wanted to verify if it was really my mother-in-law like I suspected. Sure enough, it was his mom. I actually don't know if she just decided to do it or if he asked her. Let's see, don't think I can post screenshots of their conversation, but basically she asked about cameras in our house and was worried I would go back and see if it was really her. He said not to worry. I don't know how to use the cameras. I do. She said to make sure he sticks to the story of it being an organizing company because later, if you admit it, she'll hold it against me that I lied to her. He said not to worry and that he would take the fall if she ever finds out. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, hey Kellen. Okay, so Kellen says, so far I would say I would not be happy if someone messed with my craft room. Absolutely. I would be furious. Divorce. How dare they both? That's a bouquet of red flags. Boundaries. Divorce. No, no, no. Oh my God, the lies. There are only 2 people I would trust to organize my craft space, and whoops, both of them are my daughters. Okay. Not good. So violating. Run from the family. Yes. Oh, hi, Marianne. Welcome. Oh, yes. This mother-in-law, and it's so funny. I unfortunately lost my mother-in-law this year, but I had a great relationship with her. She told me from like day one when my husband and I, announced our engagement that she was not the kind of mother-in-law who was going to, get involved with our business unless we asked her to. And she held true to that. Sometimes I could see it on her face, but she would never do something like this unless she was asked. And I feel very lucky because I realize not everybody has this kind of situation with their mother-in-law. There are absolutely a lot of sketchy things with this scenario. I'd like to think if I had a husband, I'd trust him enough to be in my craft room, but that's not a ticket for his mother. Yeah. My husband knows better than to go through my stuff. I mean, he'll complain about it. He'll be like, you got too many boxes of crap sitting around, or doesn't this stuff have a place to go? But he would never mess with it other than like, this thing is in my way. I'm just going to move it over here. He would absolutely never do something like this. Yes, my mother-in-law probably would have said, I didn't raise you that way. My mother-in-law had her own craft room. She totally understood this. So I was blessed for 28 years, almost 28 years. So yeah, I think there's so much about this, and Reddit declared this person not the asshole. I mean, obviously, it just totally insane. Now, here is the one thing where she says, I did go through his phone. So that is a little problematic. And this is one thing that, I often see in these Am I the Assholes, not craft related, like when it's about like relationships and stuff, where, you find out somebody's cheating, but then you also violated their privacy. So like, and then from my perspective, like violating somebody's privacy by looking at their phone is not as bad as cheating on person. So to me, I'm kind of like, well, you gave me a reason to look. But also, I mean, again, there are privacy considerations here, and maybe the cheating one is not the good one. It's like teenagers, you read your kid's diary, things like that. It's kind of like, where do we draw the line between person A doing something bad or person B finding out what person A did, right? Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with you, Martin. When someone lies to you, you have a reason to root out the truth. I agree. One thing that people said was, don't even deal with the phone. Go watch the video footage on their house cams, their security cameras. And, I kind of was like, yeah, I think that would probably be the better way to go. But yeah, just scrolling through here is like, well, here's one comment. My question is, why was organizing your craft room such a big deal that your husband and mother-in-law went to great lengths to scheme and plot and lie? I want to know what that's about, right? So that's weird. Why on earth did that's weird. I don't know why the auto mod doesn't like the word creep. Yes, inside house cams are creepy. I think if my child was younger and I had, babysitters and stuff coming in and out, I might have like a nanny cam, in some part of the house. But yeah, having cameras like all over your house, that's a little questionable too. I mean, I guess I just asked the question of like, what is going on? What do we not know about this family? Yeah, there's definitely more. And the funny thing is, not necessarily these scenarios, but what you'll often find in these "Am I the Asshole?" is you totally agree with the person. You're like, oh my God, how can anybody think that this is any other way other than, these people did you wrong? And then you find out that the person hasn't given you the whole story. So I think those are kind of the really good "Am I the Assholes?" Unfortunately, I can't find any of those that relate to quilting. So... but yeah, so people always like to present their side as, in their favor as much as possible. So, okay. This one's an interesting one. Am I the asshole for being surprised at how much my girlfriend sells her hobby craft for? I, 33-year-old man, and my girlfriend, 27-year-old female, have been living together for about a year, together for 2. Since we've been together, she's always had this hobby of making dice for role-playing games, tabletop role-playing. So basically Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of stuff. And if you're not familiar with those games, they use dice, and they're not all 6-sided dice. You have up to 20 sides on a die. And so there'll be like, I don't know how many of them are in a set, but it's like a dozen or something. And some of them are 4-sided, like triangles. I'm not a role-playing game person, but that's the gist of what we're talking about here. She makes dice. You make them out of acrylic or whatever. And they're really cool. My son has some. So anyway, so she makes these dice. I don't really understand how it works because I'm not into it, but the dice she makes are beautiful even to someone who doesn't understand. She's always sold them. She takes a long weekend every fortnight and mass produces 20 or so full sets. They always sell out pretty instantly, and I knew she made money, but not how much, and to be honest, I don't really care. Unfortunately, after making them this past weekend, she broke her wrist and she needed help to put her listings up because she can't type well. I found out that she sells them for, and this person's in the UK, 100 to 115 pounds. So that's more than $100 US. I expressed my surprise that people spend that much on these things. She was offended, and I tried to explain that I didn't mean it like that, and I just don't understand why people spend that amount of money on things like this. It wasn't supposed to be an insult to her artistry. She was upset and ended up asking someone else to help her and expressed how hurt she was because she worked so hard on these. Yeah. What do you guys think about that? Rose City Quilts uses this dice for randomizing quilts. Oh, cool. Yeah, there's a couple of, I try to think, there's this guy on YouTube that he uses the dice for, I think it's deciding what kind of sandwich he's going to make for the day. I think it's called roll for lunch or roll for sandwich or something like that. So I don't know. How do you guys feel about this one? I am surprised by the consensus. Let's see. Don't comment on stuff like that if you think it's too high unless someone asks for an opinion. Dude has no idea what people will pay for well-made dice or any other well-made item, right? Yep. So let me read a couple of comments here. Here's one who says the guy's an asshole. And here's why. Hobby. You called it a hobby, and you didn't even know how much she sells them for, how it works, or even ever looked in her store. This isn't about your single comment. This is a long 2 years of you belittling her business. It's her job, whether you meant it or not. Like, bro, 2 years and you never looked. Marianne says, nah, I wouldn't stress about it. Let's see. Here is one. He's going to say, I'm going to go with not the asshole. I totally understand what you meant. I can't understand people paying hundreds of dollars for Legos. It's nothing I've ever cared about. Same with concerts. I'm not a huge music person, so spending a ton of money to go to a concert seems bizarre and wasteful to me. That doesn't mean I don't recognize singers' talent as artists or that Legos can't be amazing. It just means I don't get it. So Druid says, unless you know the time and cost of materials and labor involved, then shut the face. Yeah. So except with that gal, her friend didn't actually make the Legos. Yeah, this is true. But I think that person was using that as an example to say, like, people spend lots of money on things they care about. You know, and I mean, this goes back to, yeah, you know, it's the value is in the eye of the beholder. You know, you think about somebody selling stuff for, like, you know, a ton of money, and they're just selling out of them like crazy, and you're like, well, I could make that. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, what? Like, this is, you know, why? If people see value in something, they will buy. Like, I don't understand the Stanley Cup craze, you know, like, but if people see value in that, they will pay what they pay for it. So I think that is something that's important to know. But that said, saying a comment like that, even if that's not what you meant, it's just insensitive, particularly when you're talking about something that somebody makes. They spend a lot of time and energy in it, and, you know, exactly, Drew. There's lots of trends we don't understand. Yeah, I would say for every cool thing I see online that's sort of trending, I see other things where I'm like, what? You know, like, why would anybody do this? Anyway, long story short here, I think that it is really in the delivery. I think that you could express surprise without it sounding bad. Like, I think you could say something to the effect of, it is awesome that, you know, that you're getting what these things are worth. You know, something like that. Considering you can buy these dice sets for probably next to nothing on Amazon. You know what I mean? I think there's a nicer way of saying it, you know? You're hard, Tim. I live in perpetual befuddlement of trends. Absolutely. There are things where I'm like, huh, this is very interesting. And next week we will have forgotten about it. Oh, I missed a comment. Saying something disparaging when they were supposed to be there to help somebody with a broken wrist. Absolutely. Like, why? Yeah. You would be surprised to note that Reddit called this person not the asshole, which I don't agree with. I would say this isn't the end of the world. This is not a divorce this man, leave this man situation. This is I think this dude needs a little bit of redirection in how he he handles his significant other's craft. Now, here's one where I'm going to catch some heat. Because I think you guys are going to agree with the Reddit opinion, and I just, you know, being a Libra, I always like to, you know, to play devil's advocate. Okay, so Am I the asshole for using my girlfriend's sewing scissors for cutting pizza? So last night, she puts a pizza in the oven. And when the timer goes off, I took it out. I yelled to the other room that the pizza was done, and she yelled back for me to cut it. The scissors were handy, and the knives were dirty. So I thought, what the heck? Let's try it. Anyways, too long didn't read. I don't want to use anything else to cut pizza with now, and she's mad at me even though I cleaned them. Oh my god. Oh, everybody get ready to divorce cake. Yeah, Jill knows about this one. I actually told her about this one. Under arrest for using the sewing scissors. Holy hell. Yeah, fired. Okay. Death. I knew this is how you guys would react. Like, okay, look. Oh, Robin is split on this one. So of course, Reddit says this guy's an asshole. Like, let me see. I would leave you if you used my sewing scissors to cut pizza. Not even being dramatic. Wash a knife. Sewing scissors can be incredibly expensive if they're high quality, and they should never be used to cut. It should only be used to cut fabric. You're probably never gonna get all the pizza out. Realistically, your only route to a proper apology is buying her a new pair. Scissors for sewing are different. My grandma wouldn't let us cut anything except fabric. Here's the thing. No, you should never use sewing scissors to cut pizza. Because, like they're saying, you shouldn't get sewing scissors wet. You know, even very fine sewing scissors, the little mechanism in the between the blades with that little screw, stuff can get rusty in there. That's not good. See, Jill was like, what if he accidentally used the rotary cutter, thinking it was a pizza cutter? And I'm like, well, no, because the rotary cutter is not that much different than the pizza cutter. You know, it's a big wheel. It's by his own pizza scissors. But here's the thing. Technically, there shouldn't be anything on a pizza that is going to harm the scissors. You know, like, you don't want to cut through paper. It dulls the scissors. But honestly, what is there on pizza that's going to dull the scissors? I mean, I don't know. Is pepperoni? Would pepperoni dull the scissors? I don't know. I think the drawback is, of course, having to wash the scissors and possibly getting them rusty, and the possibility that there's going to be like pizza grease and sauce there in the screw mechanism. That's a problem. I personally use my kitchen scissors to cut pizza. And I'm telling you, if you've never cut pizza with scissors, give it a try. If you have some kitchen scissors, you know, give it a try, because you will not go back. Cutting pizza with scissors is the only way to go. Jill says this is important to point out that how once ever have I ever had the inkling to cut a pizza with scissors. Oh my gosh, yes. I never have an expensive pair of scissors, but I do write my name on them to return if somebody uses them and they disappear. Yeah. So, yeah. I figured there would be some different schools of thought on this one. I do have two very nice, expensive pairs of scissors. Cutting pizza or any other meat with scissors is a game changer. They are! Yes, kitchen shears. 100% kitchen shears. We will not be using my dressmaking shears to cut pizza. Seriously, I agree this guy was the asshole, but I do have to say that cutting pizza with scissors is such a good idea. Really, you know, like Robin's saying, any kind of meat, you know, again, they're called kitchen shears, and they're there for a reason. Oh, special scissors for cutting meat, like Korean sear for cutting shellfish. Yeah. A scrap of yarn to scissors for Finley. Yes. You know, and I have scissors that, I don't know if I have a pair at my desk. My husband, for some reason, CarMax gave my husband's park, he's a park manager, for some reason gave them this box. And when I say box, I mean like hundreds of pairs of scissors that have CarMax written on them. They come in a nice little sheath. Anyway, we probably have a dozen pairs of them, so I rely on those being throughout the house. My husband has broken scissors, like trying to cut something so hard like that the whole part that your fingers go in like just snapped off. So yeah, scissors kind of have an interesting thing in my house. So I figured I would take some heat. All right. Let's see if I make sure I'm not missing one. It's much easier to cut meat. Yes, absolutely. I agree. Cut things up for the kids. Yeah, it is. It's so much easier than using a knife. You just snip, and instead of trying to. Actually, you know what? The person that taught me the idea of using scissors to cut things in the kitchen, because I already had kitchen shears, but I was just using them to cut open packages and stuff. My mother-in-law, she was like, "Oh yeah, I cut everything with the scissors." Okay, so I have two last ones. I think one of these is actually not, and am I the asshole? It's a bit of a sewing expo drama from about 5 months ago. And it came up in my searches and I was like, oh, there's a video that supposedly goes with this. I have not searched that. They didn't provide a link. So it's just very interesting. And I'm curious to know if you guys know anything about this. So we'll get to that one in a second. But first, this one, I'm just putting this one out here. We're all going to agree on it. But it gobsmacks me to think that this is still the world we live in. So this one is called, Am I the Asshole for Introducing My Cousin to a Girly Hobby? So this is a 14-year-old male. I live with my grandma and she really likes to knit. I learned to knit from her when I was little and I really enjoy it. Just when I'm bored or have free time, I'll knit. My family doesn't care and has caused no problem so far. My uncle got married and he has a stepson who's 7. We've all been getting along quite well. I gave him a beanie for his birthday that I knitted, and he was really interested in how I made it. So I told him what knitting was, and he was really excited and wanted to try it too. Hey, Molly! Hey, girl. Long time no see. The next time we met, I brought my old knitting needles and told him I could teach him. His mom heard and wasn't very happy and asked what I was doing. I told her that he wanted to learn to knit, and she was a bit upset about it and said that he didn't need to learn it and took away the knitting needles. I thought it was some age problem, like he's too young to handle knitting needles. But my uncle told me that she was upset about it because she thinks that boys shouldn't have these kinds of hobbies and that she wasn't happy with me introducing a girl's thing to her son. I was kind of offended, but I didn't say anything. Next time there was a gathering, she sternly pulled me aside and said that now her son won't stop asking for knitted things and wants to learn how to knit, and scolded me for introducing it to him in the first place. I felt kind of wronged, so we had an argument about it, and I didn't know if I was wrong for it. Knitting is not a girly hobby. Absolutely. Yeah, this one just made me mad. And now, this one, from reading between the lines, this person is in the UK. Just based on the way they wrote the statement. It just makes me mad that we still live in this world. You know, because there is absolutely... Oh, yeah, Molly said Tom Daly was knitting in the stands at the Olympics. Yes, there's a number of Olympic knitters. Yeah, craft is craft. People are people. People do crafts. And the thing is, if you look back in history, now I don't know so much about like knitting, although there were groups where the men did the knitting. But textiles in general, as a handcraft or a hobby, you know, way back, handcraft was generally men. Men got to join the guilds. So the weavers and the tailors and, you know, the dyers, all of these people were men. And it's really only within these, I don't know, I can't really think of a better way to say it, but like these bastardized, you know, conservative, fundamental, you know, this is the way things are supposed to be, conservative family value kind of stuff. People seem to think that, you know, there's still this gendered things about running a house, gendered things about hobbies, gendered things. And it just makes me so, so mad. Because, rewind, you guys know the things I stand for when it comes to handcraft is whether you do it as a job or you do it as a hobby, it's good for you. There should be no gender about it. It should be, handcraft is democratic. Anybody just about can grab a pair of knitting needles and some yarn, or a needle and thread and some fabric. These are things that tend to be a low barrier of entry, and from community and mental health. I mean, I said all this at the top of the stream. Like, these are the things that matter about handcraft, not that it's a woman's thing or that, only women do these things. It's that everybody can benefit from these things. And so the fact that we still have stuff like this going on, and the fact that an adult would lecture a teenage, and really 14 years old, you're just on the precipice, having just crossed the teenage barrier. This is not a kid who's practically an adult. This is a child who is just teaching another child something that's, I think, is a wonderful thing. To pull that child aside and lecture him for that, I can't wrap my head around that. And it just really made me mad reading that one. And honestly, I think I had to include it just because I knew you guys would feel the same way as I do. So yes, that one was a bit self-serving. But yeah, that one made me so mad. I was like, how dare? Kellen says, makes me sad. Men are fashion designers. Yep. She probably wears something designed made by a man. Yep. Absolutely. Men in war. Yes. Why was every soldier, and I don't know if they still do it, but every soldier in World War II at least, and in Vietnam, was issued a sewing kit because they were supposed to keep their uniforms in good repair. Yeah, men at sea too. Yes. It's crazy. Right? Your favorite cross stitch is a dude? Yes, there's a number of guys who do cross stitch. That's the thing in the quilting world, those of us that make quilts, or if you study modern quilting, there's so many guys in quilting and some of our friends here who may be lurking or may not be, I'm not sure. But, it's unfortunate that there's this attitude that we can't have equality in things like hobbies and housework and stuff like that. It just, it's gross. Yeah. Artistic is genderless, craft is gender. Exactly. 100%. I agree. All right. This one's drama. And I'm pretty sure. Okay, so this thing is called Sew Expo. And I'm not exactly sure if this is the same thing as the original Quilting and Sewing Expo, or if this Sew Expo is something different. But I have been to the original Quilting and Sewing Expo a number of times, so I'm kind of familiar with the culture of that. This happened 5 months ago, or was posted 5 months ago. This is not an Am I the Asshole? This is just some drama. So let me read this to you. You guys, first of all, tell me if you know who you think you know who it is. You don't have to put a name in here because I don't want to slander. But it'd be interesting if any of you guys recognize what they're talking about. So, okay. Retiring teacher at Sew Expo. So Stephanie Canada attended Sew Expo and posted a YouTube video about it. I didn't have a chance to look for her video. Here, I'm going to just drop this in the chat just so you can see what I have just read, if anybody wants to see if you can find it. So, as a person who used to do event planning, Stephanie ripped the show apart. She had safety concerns and accessibility concerns. These are important things about shows. She was quite upset at a pants fitting class. Now, the reason why I'm thinking that this is the original Sewing and Quilting Expo is that they often do, oh, okay, so Mara Dim has seen this. Okay, all right. A touchy-feely woman. Yes, Marianne. This is exactly what it is. Pants fitting, yes, but pants fitting is a big class at this thing. There's a number of teachers that teach proper clothing fitting, and pants is a big one, but also like if you have like sloping shoulders, stuff like that, there's lots of different, garment fitting things, and there's a number of instructors that do it. So, okay. She was quite upset at a pants fitting class where the instructor was not appropriate. The instructor put her hands on the students without asking for consent. Now, to say, when you're fitting, you do often have to touch a person. But these days we ask, is it okay if I, because sometimes people don't like to be touched. I'll be honest. I don't like to be touched unless somebody is like going to give me advance notice. Yoga class. It's, if you've ever had a yoga teacher just come up and start adjusting you and you're like, whoa. I had a great yoga teacher, but she would always ask, is it okay if I just do an adjustment? Or can I touch you on the hip? Or can I touch you on, your knee or whatever? So anyway, this sounds like this woman was just touching without consent. Slapped one student on the butt and used very body negative language when discussing the bodies of the students who were called in front of the class as examples. Stephanie specifically did not call out the instructor by name, but it was easy enough to search the So Expo website and figure out the woman's name. The word was that this was to be the instructor's last class as she was planning to retire. My thought is that this might be a good thing if she did at the least put a pin in her teaching to brush up how not to assault her students in both verbal and physical form. So I'm going to have to look for this video and watch it. And I'm trying to think of a couple of the people. Like, I've never taken any of the garment fitting. But, the times that I have been to that expo, and it's because it comes to where my mom lives, where I grew up, I might have to go look and see. She needed to retire one class earlier. Yep. It's possible she asked before they started the fitting, depending on how the students were chosen. Yeah, that's a possibility. But I guess it'd be one thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to have to watch this video because I got to find out, like, what does she say about this? But, the thing is, so problem areas, like you've got a stomach that pokes out, or you've got a big butt, or, those are things that, yeah, I mean, you have to be tactful. And I think sometimes, especially when I've seen some of these teachers, yeah, I mean, they're not very diplomatic. I think they get into their teaching mode and they just don't think about diplomacy. My guess is likely this person would have been judging based on the visible discomfort of the models. Okay, yeah, as my guess as well. So one of the comments, so this person had watched Stephanie Canada's video. Let's see. Oh, shoot. I just missed it. Where did it go? Oh. Stephanie says that the teacher was measuring a student's crotch rise and put her hands very close to or on the student's actual crotch and said, "Is that your pee-pee hole?" Oh my God. Thanks, Martin. I will definitely watch. Lord. I just can't even. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to watch that video. Right? Right, Jill? Yes. Right, Jan? I can't even. Well, it's interesting. I see people chiming in here about, not sure about this being her last class. I see her on a schedule for upcoming expos. This, again, was 5 months ago. Yeah, I'm going to have to look into this one further. Yeah, so here's a person who explains, how they do this. See, I work in theater and was trained to do measurements and fittings by quite old-fashioned types. Let's see. There are just some things you relearn. I need to put my tape here. Will that be okay? I've got to put my hand inside the back of your shirt to pin this here. Is that okay? Sorry about my cold hands. You know? Oh my gosh. Oh God. Terms for toddlers are ridiculous. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just would not have touched somebody's crotch. Like, holy Moses. I can tell you, I once made a costume for, so I would actually several costumes for a belly dancer. She did, she was Persian, and she did a classical belly dance, not the cabaret type of belly dance, but the kind of stuff that they do in Egypt and the Middle East. And very beautiful, and just a really beautiful woman, very nice lady. I want to say girl because she was a lot younger than me, but I do remember I was helping fit her. And the thing is, I mean, these belly dancing costumes are skin tight, and I remember she had the skirt on for one of them. And I wasn't even thinking. I was just marking some things, and I kind of I had drawn some lines down the sides of her hips and down the sides of her, kind of down on her thighs. And I turned and kind of made one more mark, and it was right on the front. And I was using a chalk marker. So it's it's a little tube that has a little wheel. And so I just kind of went zip, one last line. And it was probably it touched the front of her in ways that were probably I should have been paying attention. And she was like, ah! And of course I apologized profusely, but I mean, I could see how you could accidentally do things, but if you're going to be fitting people, you just have to, if you're going to be involved in other people's bodies, you cannot be too careful, in my opinion. It's just kind of gross. So anywho, having seen that one come through when I was searching for Am I the Assholes, I was like, I really gotta share this. It's so good. Yes, especially in front of an audience. Yeah, because it just can be humiliating for people depending on what it is you do or say. For sure. All right, guys. So, are you ready to get back in front of the Lady of Godey's? There is an expectation that people should also have when having a fitting. Well, see, the thing about that is, I think that is when, whoever the person doing the fitting, the clothing maker or the tailor or the person doing measurements or whatever, that's where the diplomacy comes in, and preparing people for what they're going to experience, to say, look, I'm going to have to touch your body, and I just, let me know. I'm I'll let you know what's going on as we go, but to give people an idea, because if you've never been measured, or you've never you're new to working with clothing, yeah, you have to warn them there's a possibility that you may need to get a little too intimate. Yes, and if they're not okay with being touched that way, then we have to figure something out. We need that measurement, So I think it's a lot about communication. Honestly, people don't communicate well. Or they communicate thoughtlessly. Sometimes people communicate quickly. They, comes into the head, it goes out the mouth. And I think it's important sometimes, if there's anything that could be misunderstood or is something touchy or sensitive, that you gotta wait a beat from entering the brain to coming out the mouth. You wait a beat and you say things diplomatically. And I don't think that can ever be too much communication. I think that sometimes people get irritated when they're bombarded, but I still think that it's better to get the information out than not. Yes, hand the tape to your son and say, hold it here. Yes. For the most part, if you're talking about, yes, the Friends episode about the tailor, Joey's tailor. Oh, that one was so funny. But yes, if you have to, an inseam, absolutely, an inseam can be a little bit, a little troublesome. And so, yeah, I mean, there are ways that you don't have to bend or necessarily change the, yes. It's where he'd go measure, move the junk to the other side and then back down the other side. Oh my gosh, yeah. And I'm trying to remember how the joke went. It was Joey's tailor, and Ross had gone to him and experienced that. And Ross was like, that's not how tailors work. And I think Chandler said something like to the effect of, like, you know, tailors for Caligula. Just some ridiculousness. Are you being served and needing the inseam of a man in a kilt? Oh my gosh, too funny. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think my mom used to watch Are You Being Served? I never got to see much of it, but all right. Let's get back to the Lady of Godey's. Let's see. Last week. Yeah, it was last week. We were reading, we read about The Prince of Publishing, which was about Louis Godey. And we are now going to read called Woman's Monument. I think, I may go over a little bit, but I think we'll get through this one today. So, as a reminder, we are reading The Lady of Godey's, Sarah Josepha Hale, by Ruth E. Finley. And Sarah Hale is a really fascinating woman. So hopefully we're going to get into kind of all the different things that kind of how she got started. We know she was recruited to be the editor, the lady editor. So this is chapter 4, Woman's Monument. Sarah Hale had done many things in Boston, in addition to editing the first women's magazine that won her recognition. Identifying herself with the life of the city, her charitable and civic activities soon became extended and various. Among her public accomplishments, none lent her more prominence, nationally as well as locally, than her connection with the raising of the memorial on the battlefield of Bunker Hill. For almost a century now, Bunker Hill Monument has stood in all its finished pride and met the sun at his coming, to quote the eloquent Daniel Webster. The eloquent Daniel Webster. I guess one can gather eloquence when one writes the dictionary. It is as much a part of American tradition as the shrine at Mount Vernon, the Lincoln Memorial, or the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It is more, for it was the first of the great monuments to be built to a national past, the first memorial consciously motivated toward preservation of historic scenes and relics as a symbolic background for a national future. The undertaking was a private enterprise. Credit for originating the idea in 1822 rests with General H.A.S. Dearborn, son of Major General Henry Dearborn, who served as a captain at the Battle of Bunker Hill, and one William Tudor, Esquire, founder of the North American Review. In 1823, the Monument Association was incorporated in the names of 24 citizens, among whom were Webster and Edward Everett. The short story, The Devil in Daniel Webster captures his eloquence. Yeah. Was that a Mark Twain? I can't remember. Yeah, it's been decades since I've read that. Laying of the cornerstone took place on the 50th anniversary of the battle, June 17th, 1825. It was one of the occasions always to be remembered in this country. General Lafayette, at the time a guest of the nation, wielded the trowel that spread the mortar. Now, Lafayette, he visited twice, so he must have been quite busy during those visits if he was laying the cornerstones for different monuments. 200 veterans of the Revolution, 40 of whom were survivors of the famous engagement, were present. The parade was of such length that the front nearly reached Charlestown Bridge ere the rear had left Boston Common, while the streets were thronged even to the housetops, altogether there was presented a spectacle never before witnessed on this continent. Daniel Webster delivered the dedicatory address. He spoke in the presence of as great a multitude as was ever perhaps assembled within the sound of a human voice. Well, I'm just Daniel Webster, but, possibly the biggest crowd. Biggest crowd ever. Haven't heard anybody say that recently. This was a historian writing in 1880. This wasn't Daniel Webster's. Okay. A veritable ecstasy of patriotic emotion prevailed. This uncounted multitude, Senator Webster began his speech. Oh, I didn't know he was a senator. Did you guys know that Daniel Webster was a senator? Began his speech, provides the feeling... No, this is Daniel Webster of the dictionary, right? Oh, God. I tend to get history mixed up sometimes, so you guys correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so this uncounted multitude provides the feeling which the occasion has excited. These thousands of human faces, glowing with sympathy and joy, proclaim that the day, the place, and the purpose of our assembling have made a deep impression on our hearts. First, by the presence of Lafayette and the enthusiasm of the crowd, the famous orator outdid himself. He made the name of Boston and the fame of Bunker Hill Monument ring throughout the land. His words that day have become an immortal part of American literature. And then the whole project fell flat. The first thing that went wrong was the discovery that the foundation was not strong enough, and that consequently the cornerstone set by Lafayette would have to be moved. The design of the monument, curiously, had not been fully specified when the cornerstone was laid. Finally, the stone found lodgment in the center of a new and more massive foundation. Thereupon, the work proceeded until a height of 40 feet was reached. 40 feet? That's really tall. And the architect's drawing calling for an obelisk raising 220 feet. 40 feet, that's like 4 stories. But in 1828, the moneys of the association, comprised entirely of private donations, gave out. In addition, there was a debt of $23,000. A sum secured by 5 men who, already having given liberally of their means, could afford to give no more. Wow. $23,000. This is what, 1828? The committee tried desperately to rouse public generosity and failed. Undoubtedly, Senator Webster had been right in his statement that the dedication had made a deep impression on the hearts of an uncounted multitude. It had not, though, reached their pocketbooks. Financially, the multitude remained uncounted. Okay, Daniel Webster, yeah. American lawyer and statesman. He represented New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Okay. He was not the dictionary guy? Why am I not remember the details of the devil and Daniel Webster? I'm a bad historian. I'm such a bad historian. Noah Webster. Okay. There needs to be a cake shaming. Because I have mixed them up. And I should have remembered from the devil and Daniel Webster that there is a difference between these two men. Okay, they were cousins. Okay, close enough. Okay. The work perforce was stopped. Sorry, my allergies. With many tons of granite blocks strewn helter-skelter over the crown and sides of the hill, enough to complete another 18 feet of the shaft, had there been the wherewithal to pay the masons' wages. The site was so defaced as to be an eyesore. The uncompleted monument, with its jagged top, people complained, looked like a giant's tooth spewed up by the sea. One more spurt of half-hearted interest followed in 1834. So this was like 6 years. This thing stood there like an eyesore. The labored building of a second 40 feet resulted. This thing's 80 feet now. But here construction ended, in hopelessness it seemed, and the obelisk stood for years, unfinished, unsightly, and forlorn. As time went on, it became the object of derision, a byword, a joke. Promises were made by the procrastinating facetious to be fulfilled. When Bunker Hill Monument is done, I guess that was like when pigs fly. The failure was peculiarly embarrassing to the patriotic men who had sponsored the undertaking, for the public spared nothing of criticism. There was talk even of scraping together enough money to have the apparently never to be completed structure tore down. And then, almost 20 years after the project had been started, something happened. Oh, what do you think happened? A female had an idea. She not only had an idea, she was prepared to put it into effect. We know Sarah, she got shit done. The lady with the idea was Mrs. Hale. She had arrived in Boston in 1828, her 5 children clinging to her skirts. Remember, she's a young widow with 5 young children. And founded her ladies' magazine. That was the year the work on the monument received its first check, a circumstance that immediately enlisted her sympathies. The daughter of a revolutionary officer, an editor who all her life was to be almost truculently patriotic, the Bunker Hill Memorial appealed to her deepest feelings. In all probability, her first championship of the monument was purely emotional. It is doubtful if she calculated that a solicitation of women in behalf of the cause would bring publicity to her periodical or aid in its circulation. Nevertheless, hers was the first magazine to conduct a public money-raising campaign. A common enough method of popularizing a publication in later years, when newspapers and magazines alike have backed everything from Better Babies to business as usual. The idea a century ago was so unique as to be doomed to failure. Not quite a failure in this instance, perhaps, but certainly not a success. Mrs. Hale's first tentative editorial on the subject appeared in the Ladies' Magazine for March 1830. Though but just over 2 years old, the magazine had attracted a sizable subscription, particularly in its own community. But for a woman's periodical, edited by a woman, to suggest that women might succeed where men had failed was so bold as to be offensive had it not been ridiculous. Just like men can't knit. If the men could not raise the necessary funds, what, pray tell, could a parcel of interfering women do? Asked the newspapers. Almost to a sheet, the dailies scoffed at the thought. At first, the gentlemen members of the Monument Association refused the proffered feminine cooperation. But still, strong men though they were, their situation was desperate, their embarrassment great. In the end, they agreed to the magazine's proposal, which was that it seek to collect money from the women of New England. Some editors are against us, the lady editor ingenuously confessed, but the Ladies' Society is being organized, though we would by no means recommend any lady to join without the consent of her immediate protector. Insert eye roll. For the newspapers, quite reasonably, had raised the question as to where the money the ladies were supposed to give was coming from. Out of the pockets of their immediate protectors, naturally, husbands, fathers, brothers. No woman controlled a penny in 1830, save in exceptions so rare as to prove the rule, and it was pointed out that the men already had been canvassed. Also here was woman stepping out of her sphere en masse and proposing to force her way into a preeminently masculine affair. How dare! A doubtful shaking of heads ensued. However, though there were those who remained unconverted, the originator of the plan was too tactful really to antagonize any large portion of either her masculine or feminine public. And the rank and file of the latter was placated only less easily than the former, so acquiesced in was the convention demanding that not only the conduct, but the opinions of a dutiful wife or daughter be entirely subservient to the wishes of her menfolk. We offer our assistance as helpers only, soothed the wily editor. The efforts of the ladies will not degrade the character of men. Isn't it sad that she's like, we're only trying to help. We're not trying to embarrass you. They don't have any problem embarrassing us. Everything to be done would be done with modesty and decorum. No husband or father need fear to be disgraced by undue forwardness on the part of any lady, nor would the women expect to share the glory. This too was made clear. Oh, well, we're gonna dig you out of your problem, but we won't take credit. This infuriates me. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hale had organized what she called her Committee of Correspondence. composed of 10 women socially prominent in Boston. But even this array of sponsors proved of small avail. The little magazine, first of all, had to educate its readers in an entirely new viewpoint of its own uses. Theretofore, no periodical had been other than a literary or political review. Editorial championing of public service along non-political lines had been introduced into journalism no longer before than 1815, and had not yet found its way into magazines. Interesting. So I guess this is just newspapers, huh? But that a thing had never been done before in no way deterred Mrs. Hale. She persisted with her editorial campaign for contributions, pleading now in prose and now in verse. Strangely, in the light of modern standards of successful publicity, the verses had the greater effect. Most of the money collected came in response to The Last of the Band, a ponderous poem written by herself and signed Cornelia, an early and soon discarded pseudonym. Let's see. Robin says, who did the men of this time think organized all the dinner parties, galas, gathering that happened in their homes? No kidding. I mean, who raised the children? Who organized the things? Who, and we could sit here and roll our eyes about this, but the one example of Am I the Asshole? A kid is literally asking, I'm a boy and I taught another boy how to knit and I got in trouble for it. This is 2024 and we've got stuff like that going on. No surprise that women were given not a scrap of credit in 1830, So she had used this pseudonym Cornelia, but apparently not for long. So here is the little poem, or some of the little poem. Yes, here is still the mountain grave, but where's the pile they said would rise? Throwing its shadow over the wave, lifting its forehead to the skies, a beacon far over land and sea, signal and seal of liberty. They're gone, those old men all are gone, like autumn's latest leaves they've passed. Last of the band I am alone, quivering in age's winter blast. But ere I mingle with the dust, shall I not see my country just? However, the question was not one of justice or of patriotism, but rather of economics. The country's finances were not on sound footing. Have they ever been? Depression and panic swayed the 30s. The Ladies' Fund ultimately totaled only about $3,000, yet it was the gift of more than 3,000 women, a mere drop in the bucket, of course, as far as completing the monument went, but very full measure as a first effort both in the way of magazine campaigning and of the public giving of women. Especially is this apparent when it is remembered that that wealth was then judged by a standard which placed the possessor of assets amounting to no more than $10,000 in the rich man class. The total cost of the completed memorial was only $100,000. Only. Easily enough raised 100 years later, but a staggering goal in the early 19th century. Though the women failed in 1830 to collect the needed sum, the public impression then made told 10 years later. When the final crisis at hand, Mrs. Hale again came to the fore, this time with the idea that was to prove effective. In the interim, her magazine had grown, and she had grown with it. Now also, she had the largest women's organization in the country back of her, the Seamen's Aid Society. I remember this is seamen, as in sailors. Here was an instrumentality to work with and through, despite the fact that an official record of the Gentlemen's Monument Association casually refers to it as a Women's Sewing Society of Boston. Sewing society or not, and it was not, there was no fumbling now, no lack of experience in cooperation, no need for the lady editor to educate her public. She had become a leader with a following, a powerful following, as the success of her 1840 appeal soon was to show. In June of that year, the Monument Association concluded its annual dolorous report by stating that under all these circumstances, it must be confessed that it is extremely doubtful whether the present generation will have the pleasure to see the monument completed. 8 days later, Mrs. Hale put her second idea into effect. The result has come down in the annals of Boston as the fair. But it was not just a fair that she proposed for the benefit of the monument. It was to be a women's fair. And this time, the lady editor enlisted not only her own magazine, now amalgamated with Godey's Ladies' Book, newspapers all over New England also fell into line. That summer, women hither and yon knit, crocheted, cross-stitched, made patchwork quilts and waxwork, put up jellies, conserves, pickles, and variously employed their skills. From New England, Pennsylvania, Maryland, from as far south as the Carolinas and as far west as Ohio, the gifts poured in. Not money this time, but that which the women might be as prodigal as they pleased, the work of their own hands. So basically, they had a bake sale. In 2 short months, all was ready. Quincy Hall, the largest building of its kind in Boston, was hired, and on Tuesday, September 8th, 1840, the fair opened. It lasted 7 days. Never before had there been such a display of the diversified accomplishments of women. Never such elaborate booths and decorations. Never such visiting crowds. Over 4,000 people attended the opening. Never a public gathering run so smoothly and so well, and certainly never before such a successful outcome. The ladies netted, after all expenses were paid, over $30,000. Beyond expectations, the gentleman admitted in the next Monument Association report. There were substantial gifts of money, too, inspired by the women's gifts of industry. 2 men gave $5,000 each. Others gave $555. Among those who gave money, there was a single woman. Opposite the name, Fanny Ellsler, the actress, stands credited the sum of $569.50. She can come up with those last 2 quarters to make that $570. Bunker Hill Monument came out of the 7-day wonder with flying colors, and so did Sarah Hale. Her fair was like nothing ever before attempted, though it has been copied many times since. They actually did something like this in Maryland, and I think it was probably not long after this that these expos they basically had downtown. Same thing, women, well, and men too, could submit, crafts, jams, jellies, all that stuff, and, be judged just like at a fair, and they would win prizes. And, it was oddball stuff. Normal at that time, but oddball to us now, like, a silver spoon was your prize, stuff like that. So the fair was copied many times since. Its rules and regulations, which she herself drafted and which widely published at the time, won general approval. Well might be adopted by any like undertaking today. They did not permit donation of the articles offered for sale to obscure the fact that actual selling must needs be on a commercial basis. Ruth Finley writes very awkwardly sometimes. And so, worth was bartered for a fair price. By 1840, Mrs. Hale had learned her American public, willing to give when it can afford, but demanding value when it buys. She had developed surprisingly as an executive. How, as Mr. Godey would say. But her greatest triumph, greater than the brilliant fair, greater than the completion of the monument, lay in the effect of the enterprise on women. They were astounded at their success. As a practical demonstration of their own capabilities, individual as well as collective, the fair was a revelation. By their own effort, they had accomplished a definite thing, a thing not little but big. Their contribution had outweighed the men's. They had taken hold of a public endeavor that had been allowed to drag over almost 2 decades, and in a mere 2 months had saved it, putting it on its feet. They had demonstrated business ability, a flair for cooperation, and above all, their own resources, actual and potential. So yeah, these men screwed around for 20 years and couldn't get this monument built. And in just a few months, Sarah Hale and a bunch of women knitted and quilted and needleworked their way into raising this money to finish this darn thing. I mean, I'm not going to say that, you know. Do I not always say that needlework saves the world? It does. If you can have your sales, needlework sales to fund things. You have, I mean, signature quilts to fund things. And, you know, there's this podcast I used to listen to, and I stopped listening to it because the person who ran it kind of was some gross stuff that I didn't like. So I stopped listening, but they kind of had this thing, it was a true crime thing, and they were always like, let the women do the work. And it was not like women's work kind of, but like, you know, this situation has been unsolved and screwed up. Let's let the women figure it out. They will do it, and they'll do it quickly. And sometimes that happens. A lot of times that happens. Just let the ladies take care of it. They'll do it right. So this is this picture. Oh, I should have showed this earlier. This is the Honorable Daniel Webster's carriage. A gift from the people of New York to the defender of the Constitution, from Gleason's Pictorial, May 1851. So I don't know that this is really all that important to the story, but that's Daniel Webster's carriage. Fancy, fancy. Probably appropriate for a senator. Or a dictionary man. I don't know. Okay. This column stands on Union, declaimed Mr. Webster in his second Bunker Hill address, delivered at the dedication of the finished monument in 1843. He was not thinking of women. Of course he wasn't. In truth, he gave them but scant credit and no glory for the happy outcome. But the column did stand on Union, the union of women. Eloquently, Mr. Webster pictured the engagement of 1775 as the first great battle of the Revolution, and not only the first blow, but the blow which determined the contest. When the sun of that day went down, he said, the event of independence was certain. Even as he spoke, another event of independence had come to focus on Bunker Hill. For the memorial he dedicated stands today as much a symbol of the first concerted effort of American women to break the hereditary bonds of convention as of the first concerted effort of American men to cast off the political heritage of England. This second battle of Bunker Hill demonstrated to woman herself, and to man, the possibilities of her own latent power. Never again were women's offers of public aid scorned. Right. Come on, Ruth. I believe that, let's see, Jean Ray Laurie made a quilt about, and I'm trying to remember, was he Alabama or Arkansas? He was a senator, or no, he might have been a local congressman. In any event, there's this local politician in the late 60s who basically said, you know, when women want to talk about politics or they want to help out in the political sphere, we just give them a little bit more garden to plow and you know, a few more vegetables to grow. And then if that doesn't work, then we'll give them another cow to milk. And if that doesn't work, then we'll just keep them barefoot and pregnant. So, yeah, I think women's intrusions into these spheres still scorned throughout the 20th century and on into this century. So, sorry, Ruth. In 1931, maybe it sounded good, but on the contrary, ladies' auxiliaries became the order of the day, but the impetus was not only toward auxiliaries that supplemented masculine undertakings. Women's own great and various national organizations were in the making. In the decade that followed the Bunker Hill Fair, the forerunner of the Women's Christian Temperance Union was formed. In the same decade, the first suffragettes united. One major women's organization, and only one, antedates the completion of Bunker Hill Monument, the Seamen's Aid Society, originally of Boston, a movement that was to spread to every seaport in the country. It had been conceived and organized early in 1833 by Mrs. Hale. Its beginnings were small. Her own words, part of her fourth annual President's Report for the year 1836, explained its purpose. Are we still chattel? I think sometimes we are. I am my own chattel, but I don't know about everybody else. The ladies who assisted in forming our society will recollect how we assembled monthly while a work basket containing our stock of goods was carried to our place of meeting. There we passed the afternoon making garments to be given to the poor when the greatest need of most of them was employment. So this is a sewing circle or lady doctor? Or is this, like a great charitable endeavor? I think it's a great charitable endeavor. Employment, precisely. In this view of charity, Sarah Hale was a long 3/4 of a century beyond her times. Her vision, sharpened by her own hard experience, leaped ahead and saw a solution for the problem of poverty that not for close to 100 years was the world at large to recognize as the only measure calculated to bring permanent relief. Duh. Yeah. People need jobs. We still struggle with this concept, don't we? Yes, lady doctor, lady lawyer. Exactly. What? She-Hulk. Isn't She-Hulk a lady lawyer? In the 1830s, the sea, fishing and shipping, was second only to agriculture. Mechanics, as the modern world knows the term, was not. For this decade witnessed but the first experiments in the practical application of steam. It is something of a shock to realize that less than 90 years ago, it took 21 months, even with the aid of steam, to build the last 140 feet of Bunker Hill Monument. In less than 21 months, the Articles of Agreement were fulfilled to the letter, boasts Warren's History of Bunker Hill Monument Association. The only difference in the work, showing too the progress of the age during the few years since the last suspension, was the introduction of the steam engine, which displaced the horsepower formerly used in hoisting. Oh my gosh, they used the horses to hoist. Poor horses. I mean, I realize it's like a pulley. It's a physics thing, but still, they're making the horses do the work. It was a novel sight to behold the immense blocks of stone gracefully moving upwards to their places, propelled by that mysterious and newly adopted force. By the aid of steam, the period of construction was materially shortened. It took only about 21 months to construct the Empire State Building in New York, the tallest in the world in 1931, rising to the height of 1,248 feet. While steam was adapted to ships more quickly than to other carriers, sailing vessels still predominated in the 30s to be served by human hands. Even village ports were of importance. The boats were small and many could enter harbors, now long since abandoned or turned over to the pleasure craft belonging to summer people, who have brought up for vacation homes the quaint old houses in the little towns. Bought up for vacation homes, the quaint old houses in little towns that not so long ago were the feeders of a great industry. In 1830, the entire population of the country was less than 13 million, scattered over 28 states. Ohio and Kentucky were the farthest west, or were the far west. Missouri, the frontier. The only thickly inhabited section was the Atlantic coast. Here, the long string of settlements stretching north and south were filled with women and children left behind, sailors, wives, and families. It was they who, as dependents of men engaged in the then most hazardous of all occupations, constituted the first major charity problem of the United States. Casualty lists of the sea were highest and its wages lowest. In cities like Boston, where shipping interests centered on a big scale, the distress of seamen's families was chronic. With husbands and fathers absent for long periods, months at a time and often years, the women and children suffered recurrent destitution. I mean, you think even if it was high wages, it's still a matter of like, who gets the money to the women and children if these men are gone for so long? I don't know if would the shipping company send money to the family, or is that money given to them? And I feel like it's one of those things where they do their sailing thing and they get paid at ports, or they get paid when it's over. So, I mean, you could be looking at like a sailing event going from one place to another, and then you're going to get paid at the end of that trip. So it's like I kind of wonder how did these families, I mean, you know, were they expected to take the money that was made on one trip and just have it, you know, stretch for as long as possible till the next trip? I don't know. I mean, I think about these things now, you know, now that we have, you know, online banking and easier ways. It's still tough for people that, you know, don't have a weekly paycheck or a bi-weekly paycheck if they get paid by, you know, these big project payments. It's really hard on families. Mrs. Hale saw and spoke. The lot of the sailor's wife is of extreme hardship. The highest wages, which at the best of times a common seaman can obtain, is $18 a month. Often he is obliged to accept $10 or $12 only. Of this sum, he is usually obliged to take up 2 months' pay in advance for his outfit. Oh gosh, so not only does he has to buy his sailing gear, whatever that means. This, she went on to explain, meant that a sailor on undertaking a voyage would leave his family so little that his wife cannot do more than pay rent and buy fuel from her husband's wages, and must either wholly or in part support herself and the children. So basically, like, yeah, now they're going to go into the hole with 2 months' pay in the very beginning of this occupation, and then the family gets like pretty much nothing ever. Probably what spurred the lady editor, herself an inlander, to activity in the behalf of seamen's wives was her sudden coming face to face with wholesale want. There could be no actual starvation in a New Hampshire rural community, but in Boston she found a large percentage of the population hopelessly involved, hundreds and thousands of women, most of them mothers of little children, caught up in a system that denied them both support and work, or, if work, at grinding wages. Who should understand, if not she, even though it was her first contact with industrial poverty? Who knew better the terrors of penniless motherhood, withheld opportunity, and underpay? And the shamed bitterness of the need for accepting alms, this too she knew. Her yearly reports as president of the Seamen's Aid Society from 1833 to 1840 are vivid in the very restraint of their stilted language. Relying on sheer facts, they reveal an appreciation of mental as well as physical suffering that could not fail to awaken the most somnolent sympathy. Small wonder, then, that the work basket expanded. By 1836, it had become a clothing store, literally. Here at the store, everything in the way of seamen's outfits was sold, the garments having first been made by the wives of sailors. The only means of earning money for women who cannot go out to service in families or take in washing is needlework, explained the woman who had failed in the millinery business through no fault of needlework, as she herself recognized. Both the store and the employment that supplied it were huge successes. 3 months after it opened, the society could not furnish one half of the needlework wanted. But there were difficulties ahead. While the seamen and their wives were eager to cooperate with the society, its president soon found herself with 2 unexpected fights on her hands. There was an outcry from the keepers of waterfront boarding houses, who, from time immemorial, had enjoyed a percentage on all sailors' outfits purchased by their guests. Soon the alarm spread to the manufacturers of seamen's garments. Slop shop operators, they were called. From the controversy that followed, the Boston slop shop owners emerged with the dubious distinction of being the first American employers at whom was directed an organized protest against inhumane working conditions for women and the low wages paid them, and against child labor. Until our store was established, said Mrs. Hale, the slop shops allowed only 6 cents, or at the most 10 cents, for making a shirt, and about the same for a pair of trousers. As this was long before the day of sewing machines, all stitching was done by hand. With the most diligent industry, a woman could not earn more than 60 cents to $1 a week. Now, we recognize that inflation means many different, these things have changed in 200 years, but still, 6 to 10 cents for a shirt, key. We pay 10 to 50% in advance of the slop shops. And there it was in a nutshell. The society made money despite its paying higher wages and underselling competing outfitters, enough to start other branches of its charity. And the slop shop owners fought and moaned and groaned like so many Shylocks. Oh, Lord. But as in the drama of old, a woman had come to judge them. Let the women do the work, and they're going to make you look stupid, and then you're going to be all butthurt about it. As for the sailors' boarding house keepers, Mrs. Hale fought them too with their own ammunition. Men they were as low as the impossible dives they kept, dispensers of filthy lodgings, unwholesome food, and inferior grog. Sailors once drunk were easily robbed. The lady editor persuaded the society to try the experiment of opening boarding houses of its own. Mariner's House was the first one called. The first one was called. It was furnished out of the attics of Beacon Street. So I think what Beacon Street is where the Richie Riches lived. I guess still do. Is it Beacon Hill, or is it Beacon Hill? I don't know. I don't know if Jill's still here. Jill obviously knows a lot more about Massachusetts than I do. Immense will be the blessings and benefits these society boarding houses will confer. She predicted in a plea for furnishings, and she was right. Out of the acorn of Mariner's House has sprung all the sailors' snug harbors and seamen's hotels. Nor did Mrs. Hale let the children of the sea's men and women go unaided. In May 1836, the society opened an industrial or trade school for girls. Principally sewing was taught. Cutting and fitting were demonstrated by the expert tailors employed to prepare the garments for stitching by the children's mothers. Now, hopefully they were appropriately taking measurements and not slapping anybody's behind. Isn't it funny how the Emma the assholes came right in here, you know? Let's see. One of Boston's oldest neighborhoods, Beacon Hill, is known for charming cobblestone streets, federal-style row houses, Yeah, I think that, it's always been kind of the fancy area, the nice area. Oh my God, Druid. I would have smacked him back. Oh goodness. Where do they get their ideas? This experiment also quickly outgrew its origin, developing the first day nursery of modest beginnings, but still a haven where employed mothers could leave their smaller children during working hours. Yes, versus making 2-year-olds work. Oh, you said not too bad. Oh my God. I definitely would have slapped him back. The youngsters were watched over by the older girls in the school. Thus, another social problem was grappled with by the Seamen's Aid Society. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Druid, I can believe it. I don't want to, but I can. That's an awful thing. Let's see. Its efforts at antedating by several years the better-known nursery group of the famous Brook Farm community. So, I mean, this is daycare. This is daycare. This is the stuff that we still are, like, seeking for working women, right? Next came a free library, conducted at first only for the trade school girls, who were allowed each to take home one book on Saturday nights. Such enthusiasm was aroused by this experiment that an adult seamen's library was established at Mariner House, and soon Boston was being solicited, even as every coast town is still solicited, for gifts of secondhand books and used magazines. Coast guards, lighthouse keepers, sailors ashore and at sea have been the beneficiaries to this day. The American Merchant Marine Library Association, the service is now called. I actually worked for the merchant marine industry for a while. It's an interesting industry for sure. Maritime is just a super interesting industry. Even today, it's interesting. That's all I can say. But yes, I remember hearing about the Merchant Marine Library Association. And today, and I don't know if it's still called that, but today they, they provide, some like textbooks and training type stuff for officers and that kind of thing. Sarah Hale did not call it anything. All she had time to do was start the ball rolling. In the 1830s, Mrs. Hale must have been the busiest woman in Boston. So great was the variety of social abuses and problems her work with the Seamen's Aid uncovered. Okay, looking to see how far we have to go. I'm going over today. There was the inadequacy of housing conditions, for instance. Along with this naturally went the question of excessive rent. Very few tenements have been constructed with reference to the wants of the poor, she announced in 1838, and thereupon advocated the erection of model tenements. But this suggestion met with no response. Here she was attacking the rights of property in a young democracy that had been founded quite as much on the principle of the individual's economic autonomy as his political freedom. In truth, the larger needs of democracy, political and economic, were so pressing that there was no room in public consciousness for so concrete and personal thing as housing conditions. Nobody knew what Mrs. Hale was talking about. Such phrases of hers as the effect of environment on character anticipated the terminology of the 20th century, but left the early 19th puzzled. Is that amazing? She was so far ahead of her time. And so it is not surprising that failure attended her attempt in 1839 to have introduced into the Massachusetts legislature a measure enacting rent laws that should fix a maximum rise for units under 5 rooms. Angela's Ashes, she knocked down the wall and burned it for fuel. You know, I never actually read Angela's Ashes. I read the other book that guy wrote. But yeah, I do know Angela's Ashes was quite sad, right? It was real poverty and whatnot. I don't know, was that in Boston? I don't know, I've always associated it with like Ireland, but yeah. So the effort died before its birth cry could be heard. Her vision had leapt to a social order so far ahead as to render her thought incomprehensible to her own times. True, she had been able to demonstrate to Boston that to find employment for the poor, paying them a just price for their labor, is the only charity which will permanently improve their condition and benefit society. This first principle, as she called it, the Seamen's Aid Society had tested under her guidance with signal effect. I don't think it was in Boston. Yeah. I hear what you mean there, Drew, and I understand. Yeah. I mean, I think that this early period in the U.S., and then, I mean, I think sort of all of the, you know, as we go from like this early industrial revolution of the, you know, early 1800s to the Victorian era, you know, when steam power is long established, and especially over in England, I know things were, in the UK, things were really tough during the Industrial Revolution, you know, Victorian era, Charles Dickens type stuff, Dickensian. You know, we had it too to some degree. I mean, this is pre-Civil War, but you know, there's all kinds of struggle we can all point to, you know. But when she went on to say that experience and observation show us that to make the system complete, under another principle must be carried out in connection with the first, namely, to secure to the industrious poor the just enjoyment of their own earnings. She might as well have discoursed in Greek. Us were not capable of assimilating the experience or even sharing the observation. She alone constituted the us that understood. One marvels that in the midst of her ramified public work in Boston, she still found energy to push forward what all the time was her major activity, her ladies' magazine. That it was the advocate of many of her reform interests is true, but she had too sure a journalistic instinct to jeopardize its success by making it a reform organ or committing it even to the individual proposal of too radical a stamp. Only casual references to the undertakings of the Seamen's Aid Society are found in its columns, although more than one of the important campaigns of her Godey's editorship can be traced directly to her Seamen's Aid contacts. Distinctly was this influence operative when in May 1837, she was editor of Godey's then. Though still living in Boston, she began her fight for the property rights for married women. The inspiration for the first editorial of that campaign, already quoted in part in a previous chapter, is to be found in the records of the Seamen's Aid. A sailor's wife who, with her children, had been rescued from abject poverty and who, for the first time in her life, was enjoying the comfort of a decent wage earned at the store, had suffered legal confiscation of her earnings in the midwinter of 1836 by a creditor of her husband. This was only one of several like cases. The comparative affluence of seamen's wives that resulted from the work given them by the society having become noised abroad, men whom their husbands had long owed saw a golden opportunity to recover. I mean, ain't that crappy. Oh, I see your wife is earning some money. I'm going to go ahead and take that for your debts. Both the society and the women were helpless to resist. The creditors were within the law. All property of a wife, including her earnings, belonged to the husband. That he was absent and that she was supporting his children mattered not. Her wages were subject to seizure for his debts. So I love how it's more important to pay debts than to feed children. I think our credit reports today say the same thing. Hence, the May 1837 editorial and the years of campaigning that followed. It is here pertinent again to note that Sarah Hale used life as she lived it for copy. But the Ladies' Magazine, dependent entirely on its lady editor, with no hard-hitting Mr. Godey in the background, published nothing about model tenements or rent laws. She knew who she needed to impress and who she needed to not annoy. These Mrs. Hale doubtless recognized as measures too at variance with the tenets of the times to be worth fighting for. And indeed, it may have been these two failures that kept her from going the way of her contemporary reformers. Very easily might her quick sympathies and ardent enthusiasms have developed into fanaticism. She, too, could have shrieked through the century, offending the great many, persuading the slender few. But the same logical mind that anticipated a later recognition of the importance of environment and the right of a just enjoyment of earnings saw that the unfollowed leader is already defeated by his own generation, that humanity must comprehend before it will change, and that the breaking of a law, alack-a-day, is scarcely more heinous in the eyes of society than the ignoring of a convention. Not that her half-century of editorializing was to be other than crusade after crusade, but when the time was come, for example, to save Bunker Hill Monument, she had acquired the finesse and strategy that were to remain her greatest editorial assets. And so it came about that Louis Godey, looking for a ladies' book editor, chose Mrs. Hale. Very much alive to trends, he knew that his magazine, already demonstrating the value and appeal of such properties, must either go forward or stagnate. The accepted time for popular periodicals had arrived. A need had developed that they filled. But thus far, they were all being cut from exactly the same pattern. The ladies' book a little duller than some, a trifle brighter than others. Only one was outstandingly individual, the Ladies' Magazine of Boston. Mrs. Hale's publication was different. Not only was it designed especially for women, the ladies' book aped it in that respect, but it was aggressive. It laid down editorial principles and then consistently supported them. It dared to criticize conditions theretofore unquestioned, and then crusaded against them. It suggested reforms and then organized committees to actuate them. It did what never had been done before, publicized the inequalities and injustices suffered by women. And because it was guided by one who possessed tact as well as energy, it managed to avoid the smash-up its feministic democracy invited. All this has been observed by the astute Mr. Godey. The Ladies' Magazine flourished for 9 years, an achievement in itself, before it was combined with the Ladies' Book. The first women's magazine in America, it had lighted, however faintly, more than one dim way destined to become a shining path in the future of women. Aha! That was interesting. I had no idea what that chapter was going to be about. Let's see. The next chapter, chapter 5, is called Beauty in Business. So I'm thinking, although I could be wrong, but I'm thinking this might get into the fashion magazine aspect of it, because the Ladies' Magazine was There's some protest, yeah. The ladies' magazine is one thing, but Godey's was the first fashion magazine for women. So, you know, Sarah Hale was really, I mean, we've already said this chapter proved it. She was ahead of her time, and just, you know, a real interesting individual. So I'm going to leave it there for today. Wish me luck on taking the train to DC tomorrow. And I'll be back on Thursday. One thing I didn't do today, I was going to watch the quote report, Joe Cunningham's latest quote report. We'll have to do that on Thursday. Yeah. So hopefully if you are free on Tuesday nights, Jill and I will see you tomorrow for Anne Hermes' interview, which should be fun. And yeah, if not, I will see you Thursday. So you guys have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful week. And as always, thank you so much for supporting me, for being here. I appreciate you guys so much. And yeah, we will talk soon. Have a great week, guys. Mwah, mwah, mwah.